The year is 1969. Our country has an immense and capable government space program that allows us to complete the near impossible feat of landing men on the moon. A few years later, the funding became significantly cut and our space program began to stagnate. As a result of this stagnation, our spacefaring capabilities were reduced significantly. Plans to land humans on further worlds continued to be pushed back until today. Today, we have all these new programs that plan to land humans on Mars or other planets as soon as possible. These programs allow government organizations such as NASA to basically promote development and involvement in the realm of space exploration through private companies. Today, I support the following claim. The privatization of space is creating new ideas and allowing humanity as a whole to push boundaries that were never thought of as possible before. Allowing private entities to exist in the realm of space exploration, I argue, promotes independence, cost-effectiveness, and completely new innovations. So firstly, let's talk about independence. Independence in that we promote independence by allowing companies to control every aspect of development. So I'm going to argue that NASA has basically developed all the infrastructure for us. So everything has been done. They've been reinventing the wheel. They're not really doing anything, and I believe that we should let private companies take to use that to continue on their stuff. NASA, for example, has developed all the infrastructure already, and it's mostly in parts. So, for example, many of their engines, pretty much everything that NASA uses is 40-year-old technology. One great example is the RS-25 rocket engine. Basically, it's NASA's workhorse rocket engine. They've been using it for 40 years. It's been around since the early 80s, and they've made very few tweaks to it. So it's pretty much the same all the time. On top of that, their newer spacecraft are pretty much the same. The Orion space capsule, for example, is pretty much the exact same shape as the Apollo space capsule. It has pretty much the same principle when it comes to reusability and being landed, and just in general, just being used. It's always the same. NASA hasn't really changed the game when it comes to that. But many space companies can do this. SpaceX, for example, has completely reinvented the game by having all of their stuff completely reusable. They have the simple capsule design, sure, but they have the reusable rockets that NASA doesn't. NASA tried that with the space shuttle, but they never really could do it. The space shuttle was used for like 40 years and really didn't do that much and had costed a lot of money for the space program. But it did a lot of things that other things couldn't do. Even so, I think that SpaceX has done a lot, and many private companies have done a lot. Now, if the government shares its technology with private companies, new developments can continue. For example, NASA already does this. NASA has their website, and on nasa.gov, you can actually go to a patent section where 60 patents have been shared and are actually being used by private companies for further development of their technology. For example, engine parts. There's a lot of different schematics for engine parts that you can look at on that website, including the engine recurrent cooling systems, which basically allow the engine to stay completely cool and they won't melt during takeoff, which is very important for a rocket. I think you'd want your engine to stay in one piece so you keep going. Secondly, we will talk about cost effectiveness. Space travel is expensive, okay? There's a lot of things with these smaller government parts like NASA. NASA actually has to suffer from things like budget cuts. Since the 60s, they've been basically being cut in their funding all the time. So now NASA can't really do as much as they used to. But private companies are more fluid in that they can manage costs in other ways. Companies can profit from a larger customer base, for example. They can use smaller private groups to sponsor their services and have them ride on their rockets. For example, the rideshare service. If you go to SpaceX's website, there's a whole section dedicated to ride sharing. So that basically allows you to pay a small sum of money and have your little tiny satellite be hitching a ride with the next launch that they have. And they have launches pretty much all the time, at least once a month. So I think you can easily get one pretty quickly if you have the money. On top of that, private companies can make money by government grants as well. So NASA can actually, as I said before, with the other things that NASA can do, they can influence all of their stuff through private companies. So they basically they'll send small sums of their money to companies like SpaceX to do things for them, such as deliver payloads and astronauts to the ISS. On top of that, companies can save money by spending less on general things. So SpaceX can spend less money by basically trying to streamline production on all of their parts. For example, their radios. In Ashley Vance's book on SpaceX, Elon Musk, and a Fantastic Future, they talk about a section where they design radios with consumer-grade parts, and they use parts that they make in their facility instead of things that are monitored and regulated by NASA. NASA argued with them that that was not right and that it wasn't going to work because they needed space-grade equipment. But that wasn't correct. That wasn't true. They actually tested it, and they designed stuff that was just as good as the NASA equipment. So they were allowed to use it. Therefore, that part became significantly inexpensive. And all of their other parts on the rockets became significantly more inexpensive as well. And as a result, that's how they got their stuff to be so much less expensive. Now, NASA spends a lot of money on very useless things, and that includes a lot of the things that they have to jump through. They'll have to spend money on lots of components that just don't work and are just much more dated. The RS-25 engine, for example, is something that they'll have to spend money on, and they won't try to tweak it, which, you know, isn't a bad thing, but they have a lot that they have to go through, and it just takes so long. Private companies can completely change that by, you know, modifying their stuff over time, making it more efficient, less expensive, and therefore giving everyone more access to space, which is what we want. And finally, we'll discuss the new innovations. So new innovations are being made all the time by these companies. Completely new tech that changes the game for space travel. So first of all, fully reusable spacecraft. Everyone loves that. Companies like SpaceX and Rocket Lab have been developing fully reusable spacecraft for the past decade. So SpaceX has already, you know, been launching and landing their rockets very successfully. They have like a 98% success rate, which is impeccable. And they have boosters that they've landed upwards of 8 times, which is insane. Rocket Lab is developing it. They're not very far, but they're pretty close. So many companies are already taking this turn and trying to make everything reusable, which has never been done, let alone never been done by NASA, truly. So it's pretty cool. New types of rocket engines as well are being developed. For example, Rocket Lab has done something extremely amazing by taking parts of their rocket motor and using electronics to inject the fuel into the rocket engine. That has never been done, especially for flying spacecraft. It's very impressive what they managed to do. And then on top of that, we have improvements on existing technology. So for more efficient parts in general, Rocket Lab, for example, 3D prints a majority of their motor or rocket parts. So everything can be produced very quickly. And then on top of that, we also have companies that have reinvented manufacturing by doing it all in one place. Since the companies are so small and very centralized, they have to do everything there. And because of that, they can get everything done much faster. So in conclusion, I believe space exploration seems like a wonderful place to allow private entities to flourish. The privatization of the infinite abyss outside our planet will allow independence, cost-effectiveness, and finally promote new and impactful innovations in the field. It seems like we have a fine future ahead of us thanks to this new ideology of space travel.